Hey there, I'm Tori Amos, and you're watching my box set on V-Spot. My mother says that I was 2.5, and I would crawl up to the piano, and I would play anything that I could hear. So if my sister, who was taking piano, was playing something, I would come and play it back. Or my mom had a great record collection. She sold records in the 50s. And she would, when my father went to the church, he's a minister, she would be, a little bit naughty and get out her records because my dad wanted us to be interested in religious music. So my mother would pull out Billie Holiday, Fats Wyler, and she would say, "Why don't you have a listen, dear, to this?" And so I would play them. And by the time my dad got home from church, I'd be working it into the repertoire. And he wouldn't know, really, what the songs were. And I think it made my mom feel a little bit sneaky. And so as things progressed, my brother was 10 years older. And he would bring in the Doors and the Beatles. The Doors, of course, had to be in and out before my father came home because he had been labeled prophet of the devil. So I had to learn the Doors and the Stones before Dad got home. I was signed around 1987, and it came out in 1988. And it died a horrible, miserable death. And it's good that it did. In reflection, it's really good because I do understand how the music business operates. I have no illusions about how it works. If you can go back with me to 1987, that was when the LA rock chick scene was happening, and the Rainbow Room, and that whole life was happening with big hair. And so if you can go back into that time frame, very different than what was happening in Britain, then you can see a lay of the land. Now across town, the executive producer of my record was doing this girl who happened to be called Tracy. Now, for some reason, they thought that the singer-songwriter thing would work if you were a folk person. But the girl at her piano thing, this was just not going to happen. They weren't going to support it. So I'm staring back down at the Sheraton lounges of the world, or I'm looking at, I can compose anything. So even if this isn't necessarily my heart and soul, I can do this. And Tracy Chapman, of course, was being produced across town. And I would kind of go in my knee-thigh boots and tromp around thinking, well, I guess everybody has to be slotted in somewhere, and that just isn't my destiny. Once Why Can't Tori Read was trashed, it was liberating in a sense because I wanted Atlantic to drop me and I just wanted to start again. And they wouldn't drop me because I wanted to be dropped. In a strange way, it works that way. When you don't want a guy, that's when he wants you. But when you want him, then, he's off with your friend. It's strange, but true. Same with records. So they insisted that I make another record, but I was very committed to following myself as a musician and a composer. And there was nothing that could shake my faith in what I knew I wanted to do. Even if nobody listened, nobody bought that record, even if that were going to be the case, I knew that was going to be my path. I think there's a time when you sing night after night something like this that can wear on you, and you don't realize that when you're alone writing it, needing to write it. So many months later, many shows later, I think it was a little difficult ripping that skin off every night. But then young women would come to the show and express some of their experiences, some of them completely horrifying. And one girl on the '94 tour, fainted, if I remember correctly, and was carried back. And we spoke with her, and she just said, "Can I come join the tour?" She was about 14. And we said, "Oh, no, we can't." She said, "But if I go back home tonight, I'll be raped by my stepfather. I was raped last night, and I'll be raped when I come home tonight." And in that moment, I mean, I called my attorneys and said, "What can we do?" And they said, "No, if you take her across state line, as we were that night, then you'll be arrested for kidnapping." So that was the night when RAIN, the idea of the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, was founded. And you begin to see how music can bring people together. Finding your voice is the most important thing you can do. It's different for each of us in this room. But you have to recognize when you found yours or when you really haven't, and you're just agreeing with everybody because it makes Pops happy, or it makes the girlfriend happy, or it gets people off your back at work. You have to know, hang on a minute, what path am I following? And sometimes that's a lonely walk. Sometimes everybody leaves you. Trust me, when the champagne is flowing, there's a line out the door. Everybody's there. But when it's not, very few people are there. Because most people don't show up for essence. They don't show up for the art, for the work. They show up for the success. And once you begin to understand that, then you really know what people are made of. And Silent all these years, this was my mantra and has always been my mantra. It's the song that walks with me through all kinds of adversity. Cindy Palmano, I had worked with as a photographer, and because there was such chemistry, she said she'd take a crack at the video, and then the video became the album artwork. She had done the photo shoots for, there had been an EP released in Britain in 1991 before the album came out. So it was the first video, and working with her was one of the most magical experiences I've ever had. I never talk about who songs are about, just because I have to run into people and nobody knows who the songs are about, and that's why I think I still have friends. And so I keep those secrets safe with me. But I will tell you about the video. Little did I know that I would be living within 15 minutes of where this was shot. This was in a deserted stretch of beach in North Cornwall in England. And I had never been to this specific part of England before. But Cindy had. She was a Devon lass. So this was sort of her stomping ground. And there are people that come up to me today when I'm just walking through the village. "Oh, I was there in early 1994 when you made China." And after all these years, I had no idea that my future husband used to go there as a little boy and run around as a kid on holiday. We moved down there many years later, and I was just driving around one day after having moved there and recognized this beach. The song is about a girl and her father, or a girl and the man that takes that place. It could be your grandfather or an uncle, but it is really this very special tie that I think a girl can have with a male force. Sometimes you hear so much about those relationships that aren't so good, but this is one where the father really does, the father figure really wants things to go well for this young girl, and maybe they struggle and maybe they don't always see eye to eye, but there's a deep love there, and you don't always hear people talk about those relationships, and yet I've had some incredible male influences in my life, my grandfather as well as my father, where their love, we don't always agree, but where their love is deep as deep can be.